Hey, good morning. This is Dylan Jovine from Behind the Markets. Happy Monday. The big thing that's been circling in my head all weekend is as I was with my kids, as I was out running errands, what it means that the 50-year petrodollar agreement between the U.S. and Saudi Arabia quietly ended. And I've been really circling back about what this means for the dollar status as the world's reserve currency. Now, this has not been reported in the mainstream press because obviously, the Biden administration is trying to downplay this. And, from their point of view, they don't want this kind of leaking out before an election. So this has been kind of in the side press, the side financial press. But what does it mean? And by the way, if you search up U.S. Saudi Arabia dollar agreement, what you'll see is that they'll say it's fake news that the agreement ended. And they'll say that they're calling it fake news because there was never an official agreement. But the truth is, it was an understanding, and that understanding did expire and end recently. So, it's obvious why the Biden administration is downplaying this, but I'm going to tell you why you should be concerned about it. Basically, the petrodollar agreement was an agreement between the United States and Saudi Arabia to price all energy, oil, in U.S. dollars. That means anybody who bought oil from Saudi Arabia and the OPEC countries, which is oil is a $1.4 trillion commodity. It's the biggest commodity in the world, obviously. Anybody who bought oil from Saudi Arabia, let's say as an example, had to pay Saudi Arabia in US dollars. Now, that benefits the United States in immense ways. Number one, it meant that the country buying the oil had to have US dollars. Number two, it meant that when Saudi Arabia, let's say, sold $300 billion in oil last year, they would take, let's say, $250 billion of that money and bring it back to their country, build schools, drill for new wells, the social programs, whatever Saudi Arabia does in its own country. But that extra $50 billion would go to invest largely in US dollar denominated assets like treasury bonds. Now, why is that important for us? The US government has been running basically such a big deficit right now that it's come out to about $1 trillion every 100 days. I mean, it's frightening and it's unsustainable. But the reason the US government has been able to run such absurdly high deficits is because countries like Saudi Arabia get paid in dollars. So Saudi Arabia takes that extra money and they buy things like US government bonds. But that is a big problem. When our buyers stop taking their money in US dollars, that means that they're going to look for other alternatives to invest all their cash. So in this situation, what Saudi Arabia is going to do is going to start pricing a lot of their oil sales in China's currency, the Chinese yuan. And this has been part of China's long-term plan to really hammer away and chip away at the US dollar's dominance around the world. And we started warning about this very thing last September. So where are we right now? So China scores a big victory at the expense of the United States on Joe Biden's watch, unfortunately. And right now we have a situation where China has just been opening up their bond market for this very reason. So Saudi Arabia now, instead of taking that $50 billion and investing it in US dollars, US assets like US Treasury bonds, they're going to actually look at China's bond market now and say, okay, we're getting paid in China's currency, the Chinese yuan. Now let's look at China's bond market and start investing that excess money in China's bond market. We basically will help China fund their deficits or whatever investment infrastructure they need. So this is a significant blow to the United States. It is really quite shocking. And the most disturbing thing is that nobody in the mainstream press is talking about it. Nobody, which tells you that it's a real problem. They don't want the stink of this anywhere near their campaign before the election at all. So they're going into full damage control mode to really suppress this information. Now, you're not going to see a disaster from this move today. It's not like one day, it's not like 9/11, which, I was one of those guys running down the street, where all of a sudden, boom, the world changed. What things like this do is they do little incremental changes. So all of a sudden, the Treasury, OPEC members will buy less and less Treasury bonds every single year, which is going to cause the United States to have to make some very, very tough decisions, really. Does the Fed step in and keep buying their own bonds, saving the U.S. Treasury Department and our Capitol Hill? Or is the United States government finally forced to cut back some of the spending? So this is not going to be pretty when this hits, but it is happening, and this is happening right now in real time, and you need to know about this. That's all. Have a great Monday.